The last thing my sister said to me before I cut off contact was, "I'm doing this for the family." She said it the same way she said everything: warm, measured, completely certain of herself. 3 days later, she called my parents and told them I had dropped out of medical school. She told them I was living with a boyfriend who had a drug problem. She told them I was too proud to ask for help, too far gone to be reached. None of it was true. Not a single word. My parents blocked my number on a Tuesday night. My mother sent back my handwritten letter unopened with her own handwriting on the envelope. My father told my aunt to stay out of it. That was 5 years ago. I'm a trauma surgeon. I save lives for a living. I make decisions in the space between heartbeats, and I make them right, because the alternative is someone dying on my table. Last January, at 3 a.m, my pager went off. Level 1 trauma. Motor vehicle collision. Single female, 35. Hemodynamically unstable. I badged into the trauma bay, picked up the intake tablet, swiped to the patient chart, and I stopped walking. Because the name on that chart was Diana Doran. My sister. Before I tell you what happened next, take a moment. If this story is already pulling at something in you, subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now let me take you back to where this really started. Not 5 years ago. Much further than that. My name is Cara. I'm 28 years old. I direct the Second Chances Scholarship Program out of an office on the 4th floor of Whitmore Hall at Millbrook University, which is 11 miles from the house I grew up in and worlds away from everything inside it. The office has one window. Faces east. On clear mornings, the light comes in flat and gold, and I can see all the way to the water tower on the edge of town, the same water tower I used to navigate by when I was a kid. Riding my bike to the public library because it was the only air-conditioned place I could think straight. That's where I did my homework for 3 years. Table 4, near the periodicals. The librarian, Mrs. Okafor, used to save me the good chair, the one with armrests that didn't wobble. She never asked why I was always there alone. She just saved the chair. I applied to college from that library. 7 schools. 7 applications typed on a public computer that logged you out every 45 minutes. I brought a flash drive and a printed checklist. I didn't tell anyone I was applying. There was no point, no one would have asked to see the responses. When the acceptance came from Millbrook, I read it standing at the library printer. The paper was still warm. I study educational equity for a living. I trace the paths that kids take or don't take when systems fail them. I know what happens when a child is told she is too much, or not enough, or simply wrong in some way that can't quite be named. I know the numbers. I know what the data says. The data says most of those kids don't make it back. The data says I'm an outlier. On the corner of my desk, between my coffee mug and my laptop, I keep a cream-colored card. It's from the program's first scholarship recipient, a girl named Jonelle, who was 17 when her mother locked her out of the apartment, and 18 when she received the first Second Chances award. The card is slightly bent at one corner. She left it under my office door before her first semester finals. It says, "You gave me a room. I'll give you everything else." I've never moved it, never framed it. I just keep it there, where I can see it when I'm on the phone. I was on the phone with Dr. Nora Walsh when the commencement invitation arrived. Dr. Walsh is the one who found me on the side of a road 13 years ago, bleeding and hypothermic, and made a decision that changed the direction of everything. She is the person I have become closest to in my adult life. She is, in every way that matters, my family. "You've already decided," she said, when I told her about the envelope. The afternoon light through my east-facing window had gone gray by then, rain coming in from the coast. "I need to think," I told her. She didn't say anything. That meant she already knew. The blue ribbon is still in a box somewhere. I know because I never threw it out, and I'm not the kind of person who loses things. I was 11 when I won the regional science fair. Water filtration. 42 entries. Mine placed first. I ran home carrying the ribbon in both hands, holding it away from my body like it might wrinkle. My mother was in the kitchen. She looked up when I came in. She smiled, said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," and then Kayla walked in from dance practice. Kayla was 8 years old. She had been working on a pirouette. The pirouette hadn't gone right. Someone in the class had laughed. My mother's arms, which had been open, briefly, in the direction of the ribbon, moved across the kitchen and wrapped around my sister instead. I stood there. The ribbon was still in my hands. I didn't know what to do with it, so I held it until my arms were tired, and then I went upstairs and put it in a box. That was the first time I understood the geometry of our house. There was space for one daughter to take up. The other was expected to compress herself into the margins. I compressed. I learned to celebrate quietly. I stopped showing my report cards to anyone straight A's didn't compete with Kayla's B- crises. I stopped announcing achievements and started simply completing them, quietly, alone, like solving a math problem in the margins of a notebook that no one would ever grade. My mother wasn't always like this. When I was 9, she sat with me all night before my city spelling bee. We made flashcards at the kitchen table, just the two of us, while the house slept. She braided my hair in the morning while it was still dark. She said, "You're going to be extraordinary, Cara." I believed her completely. I don't know where that woman went. The summer science camp letter arrived on a Saturday morning. Full scholarship. 2 weeks. Real researchers, working on real environmental projects. I'd applied in secret, filled out the forms in the library, and asked Mrs. Okafor to proofread my personal essay. She'd read it twice, handed it back, and said, "Send this." I showed my parents breakfast. Dad looked up from his phone just barely, just for a moment. "That's nice, Olivia." He said my middle name by mistake. He'd done that before. I'd stopped correcting him. Kayla started crying before my mother had finished reading the letter. "Why does she get to go away?" Kayla said. Her voice had a frequency that cut through walls. "That's not fair. She always gets to do things." I was 14. Kayla was 10. Neither of us had been anywhere. My mother set down the letter. She put her hand on Kayla's shoulder. "Cara." Her voice had that careful tone, the one that meant the conversation was already over. "Maybe this year you could skip it. Your sister needs stability right now. She's going through something." I looked at the letter on the table, with my own name on it. "It's a full scholarship," I said. "There's no cost." "It's not about cost." My mother folded the letter along its original crease. "It's about what our family needs." I didn't go to the camp. 2 weeks later, I watched from my bedroom window as a car pulled into our driveway, a used Honda, silver, nothing special. My parents had been discussing it for months. Saving for it. It was for Kayla, they said. For when she was old enough. An investment in her future. I did the math in my head. The camp scholarship had been worth approximately $4,000 in program value. The car cost $9,000. The numbers sat in my stomach like stones. I was 14. I didn't say anything to anyone. I went back to the library and applied for a different program instead, smaller, closer, no cost to the family. I got in. I didn't tell them I'd applied, or that I'd been accepted. I just went. By the time I was 15, money had started going missing from the house. $20 from my mother's nightstand. A $50 from her wallet. Small amounts, irregular. Each time it happened, Kayla had an explanation ready. She'd seen me near the purse. She'd seen me in the hallway by the bedroom door. My father called me into his study the third time it happened. He had the look he reserved for formal conversations, sitting upright, hands folded. He asked me directly, had I taken money from my mother? I said no. He said my sister had seen me. I said my sister was lying. His jaw tightened, his hands unfolded and refolded. "Don't accuse your sister," he said. His voice wasn't loud, it was worse than loud. "I'm disappointed in you. I thought you were better than this." I was grounded for 3 weeks. The laptop I used for schoolwork was taken. A promised science camp opportunity, the one I had earned with my own grades, not through any family money, was canceled. "We can't trust you with independence right now," my mother said. Kayla stood at the top of the stairs when I came out of his study. She was watching. When my parents weren't looking, she did something I have thought about many times since. She smiled. Not a child's smile. Not even a teenager's smile. Something measured and precise, and much older than she was. I was old enough to understand what I was looking at. I just wasn't old enough to know what to do about it. There was a family photo on the wall at the bottom of the stairs. Taken when I was 8, Kayla was 4. We're all squinting into the sun. My mother's arm is around both of us. I stopped looking at that photo after the study conversation. I stopped looking at most things in that house. I retreated to the library, to school, to anywhere with a table and a chair and no one watching me be wrong about myself. 2 more years. I told myself 2 more years and I'd be gone. I was wrong about the 2 years. October, my junior year. There was a boy in my AP chemistry class named Jake Walker. He was kind in the specific way that very good-looking people sometimes are, easily, without effort, without noticing the effect. He was terrible at stoichiometry. I helped him after class 3 times. We agreed to study together at the library before midterms. That was the entire extent of it. That was everything. Kayla had a crush on Jake Walker. I knew because she'd written his name in her diary. I'd seen it once, accidentally, when I went to return a pen she'd borrowed. She was 14. He was 16. I didn't think about it. I should have. The storm warning started on Thursday. By Friday night, the rain was coming down in sheets. The kind of rain that turns headlights into blurs, that floods the underpasses, that makes the whole town feel smaller and closer and more dangerous than it usually seems. I was in my room doing English homework when I heard Kayla crying downstairs. The crying started around 8. Loud, heaving. The kind of sound designed to carry through walls and ceilings and reach every room in a house. I put down my pen and listened. I heard my mother's voice low, soothing, the tone she used exclusively for Kayla. I heard my father's footsteps cross the living room floor. Then his voice up the stairs. Cara, get down here. I came down slowly. Each step felt like a decision. Kayla was on the couch, her face buried in my mother's shoulder. My mother was stroking her hair. My father stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed. His face the specific shade of red that meant someone was already guilty. What's going on? I asked. Kayla lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen. Her cheeks were wet. She looked at me, and for less than a second before the performance resumed, I saw something behind her eyes that had nothing to do with crying. Tell her what you told us, my father said. Why do you hate me? Kayla's voice broke on the last word, beautifully timed. Why have you been spreading rumors about me at school? My mind went completely blank. She held up her phone. A screenshot of group chat, messages with my name on the profile picture. Cruel things about Kayla. Things I would never say, had never said. The account wasn't mine. The words weren't mine. But my name was there. My face was there, and my parents were looking at the screen, and then at me, with expressions that had already made their decision. I didn't write those, I said. Stop. My father's voice cut through the room. Just stop. Someone made a fake account. She's been meeting with Jake at the library, Kayla said quietly. The performance had shifted quieter now, more devastating. She knew I liked him. She's been doing it on purpose. She tried to steal him from me. We studied. For chemistry. My voice was shaking. Ask the teacher. Ask the librarian. And last week, Kayla pulled up her sleeve. A bruise, dark purple, on her forearm. She pushed me on the stairs. The room went still. I never touched you. You did. My mother stood up, moved between us. Her voice was very quiet. Cara, if you hurt your sister. I didn't. I have never hurt her. She's lying. She has been lying about me for years. About the money, about everything. Enough. My father's palm came down on the mantel. Not a slap, just pressure, sudden and final. I've heard enough of your excuses. Kayla sobbed into her hands. The perfect, complete picture of someone who had been wronged. I looked at her. Really looked. And she looked back dry-eyed behind the tears. Completely still at the center of all that noise she'd created. You're doing this on purpose, I said. Barely a whisper. Cara. My mother's voice was soft, disappointed, the worst possible tone. I thought we raised you better. My father pointed at the door. The rain outside was visible through the living room window, a solid wall of water, the kind the weather alerts had been warning about all week. The wind was bending the oak tree in the front yard sideways. Dodd, it's a storm. I can see that. Where am I supposed to go? That is not my problem right now. His voice had gone flat. Completely flat. Get out of my sight. I don't want a sick daughter in this house. Sick. The word landed differently than any word I had ever heard him say. Not angry. Diagnostic. As if he had examined something and found it defective. I went to the front door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unzip my jacket. On the console table by the door, the one my mother used for mail and keys, there was an envelope. Cream-colored. My own handwriting on the front. The acceptance letter I'd been drafting for a summer research program. I'd left it there that morning, meaning to mail it. I picked up the envelope, hold it for a moment. Then I put it in my jacket pocket and opened the door. Through the window, as I walked away, I could see Kayla watching me go. She wasn't crying anymore. The rain hit me like a wall. Within 30 seconds, I was soaked through. My shoes filled with water at the second driveway crack. The wind was coming from the east, and it pushed the rain sideways into my face, under my collar. I walked with my head down, and my hands in my pockets, one hand wrapped around the envelope. I headed toward the library out of instinct. It was closed. Dark windows. Locked. Of course it was closed. It was Friday night, 10 o'clock, the middle of a storm. The bus station was 2 miles east. If I could get there, there was a waiting room with plastic seats and fluorescent lights and a vending machine that worked sometimes. I could sit. I could think. I could call Sarah when my phone had enough battery. It was at 9% and dropping, because the charger was in my room, in the house behind me. I walked. The rain got heavier. The street was flooding at the intersection of Cedar and Millbrook Water over the curb, halfway up the stoplight post. Cars sprayed rooster tails as they drove past. None of them slowed down. None of them stopped. I thought about turning back. I thought about knocking on the door and asking to come in, and what my father's face would look like if I did. I kept walking. The envelope in my pocket was soaked through within the first block. I could feel the paper going soft. The words on the outside, my name, the program address, the carefully centered return address I'd printed from the library computer, all of it dissolving slowly against my hip. This is the part I need to say clearly, because I have been asked about it many times since. I did not see the headlights until they were almost on top of me. I was crossing the intersection at Cedar and 4th. The light was green, I am certain of that. I have been certain of that for 13 years. The rain was coming down hard enough to make the world into shapes and shadows. The horn blared. The brakes screamed. I turned toward the sound, and there was nowhere to go. The impact threw me sideways. My body hit the hood of the car and then the pavement. My head cracked against the asphalt. Rain poured into my eyes and my mouth, and everything tilted sideways and would not tilt back. I heard a car door. Footsteps running. A woman's voice panicked high. Oh my God, can you hear me? Don't move, just stay still. I'm calling 911. Hands on my shoulder. Gentle. Steadying. What's your name? I tried to answer. Nothing came out. Your parents. What's their number? I'll call them. I coughed. Tasted copper. They don't want me. A pause. Rain falling between us. What? They kicked me out. The words felt very far away. Said I was sick. Don't want me anymore. Something changed in her expression. Something I couldn't fully see through the rain and the pain and the fact that everything was tilting, almost gone. You're going to be okay, she said. Her voice shook. I promise. You're going to be okay. Sirens. Getting closer. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was her face. Rain streaming down her cheeks, her lips moving. I couldn't hear what she was saying. I found out later, when I could hear things again, that she was saying my name. The envelope in my jacket pocket was ruined. Every word on it is gone. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital room. The machines were beeping. The lights were fluorescent and too bright, and the smell was antiseptic. And under that, something floral. Someone had left flowers on the windowsill, pale yellow, in a plastic vase. I had no idea who had brought them. Dr. Nora Walsh was sitting in the chair beside my bed. I'd seen her before once, briefly, in the biology classroom where she'd given a guest lecture on educational equity research. She'd handed me her card after. You have a curious mind, she'd said. Don't let anyone dim that light. She was still there, after 3 days. She hadn't left. My parents visited once. They stood at the foot of the bed. They brought a bag of clothes, my schoolwork, and a get-well card signed by both of them. They stood there for 11 minutes, I counted, because counting was something I could control, and then my mother said, "We're glad you're okay," and my father nodded, and neither of them said anything else. They didn't ask if I wanted to come home. They didn't say they were sorry. They left before Dr. Walsh came back from the cafeteria. On the 5th day, a social worker named Rita came with a clipboard and kind eyes, and a voice that asked questions in a way that made them sound like choices instead of interrogations. I told her everything: the ribbon, the camp, the money, the fake screenshots, the storm, my father's 6 words. She took notes. She didn't flinch. Cara, she said, when I had stopped talking, you have options. You don't have to go back. I looked at the ceiling. The tile above my bed had a water stain in the shape of something I kept trying to identify and couldn't. Where else would I go? Dr. Walsh knocked on the door and came in. She sat on the edge of my bed like she'd been doing it for years, easy and unhurried. She looked at Rita. She could stay with me. Temporary foster placement. I've already started the paperwork. I stared at her. Why would you do that? She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a bird landed on the ledge and then left. Because when I was 17, my family did something very similar. A teacher took me in, changed the entire direction of my life. She touched my hand just briefly, just the back of her fingers against mine. You're brilliant, Cara. Don't let anyone make you small. I didn't say anything for a long time. The water-stained shape on the ceiling tile finally resolved into something. A running figure, arms out, going somewhere. The choice I made in that hospital room was the most important thing I ever did. I moved into Dr. Walsh's house 6 weeks after the accident. She lived in the faculty neighborhood near the university, a square gray house with a garden that had gotten out of hand, books on every horizontal surface, a cat named Ptolemy, who wanted nothing to do with either of us. She gave me the guest room. She said I could paint it if I wanted. I painted it white, because white was the color of a blank page, and I was very tired of existing inside a story someone else had written. The night I arrived, she made dinner pasta, garlic bread, a salad that was mostly arugula, which I had never eaten before and pretended to like. Afterwards, she cleared the table and put a piece of paper and a pen in front of me. Write down what you want, she said. Not what you need. What you want. I held the pen for a while. Then I wrote, college, my own work, to help kids this happened to. She read it, nodded once, stood up and started washing the dishes. Okay, she said. We'll start tomorrow. I sat at the table in her kitchen, in the house that was going to become mine in every way that mattered, and outside the window the street lights came on one by one in the October dark. I left my old house's key on the counter the morning I was discharged from the hospital. I didn't slam the door when I went. That was the last time I was ever inside it. The first month at Dr. Walsh's house was the hardest. Not because she wasn't kind, she was, consistently, without effort, in a way that felt nothing like performance. But because I had no framework for kindness without cost. Every time she left a plate of food outside my door when I said I wasn't hungry, every time she knocked softly and asked what time I wanted to leave for school, I kept waiting for the invoice, the condition, the catch. There wasn't one. I lay awake for 3 weeks waiting for the condition that wasn't coming. By the 4th week, I started sleeping through the night. By the 2nd month, I started eating dinner at the table. We ate quietly. She read. I did homework. Ptolemy sat on the windowsill and ignored us both. One night she made something I didn't recognize, some kind of grain dish with roasted vegetables, and I ate 2 full portions and then a third. She didn't comment. She just passed the serving spoon. That was the night I understood, for the first time, what it felt like to be fed by someone who didn't need anything back. I put my fork down after the 3rd portion. I said, "This is good." She said, "There's more." That was it. That was the whole moment. But I've carried it for 13 years. By the time the following spring came, I had stopped waking up at 3 in the morning convinced I had done something wrong. That's how I measured the first year. Not by accomplishments or milestones or the things I was building. By the absence of that specific weight, the weight of being always, preemptively guilty before I'd done anything at all. When it finally lifted, I noticed it was quieter than I'd expected. The quiet felt like something I hadn't been given. Exactly. More like something I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. I transferred to a new school. Different district, different building, different hallways where no one had a preformed opinion about who I was or what I'd done. I told no one about my family. I simply became Cara, the girl in the 3rd row, who always had her homework, who stayed after to ask the real questions, who ate lunch in the library 3 days a week because she liked it there. I graduated with the highest GPA in my class. The acceptance letter from Millbrook University arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I was at the kitchen table doing applications for a summer grant program when the email came in. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. Then I turned around and said to Dr. Walsh, who was grading papers at the other end of the table, "I got in." She looked up. She set down her pen. She stood up and crossed to my side of the table and hugged me, a real hug, the kind that doesn't calculate how long it's been going on. "Of course you did," she said. She was crying. I don't think she knew she was crying. Millbrook gave me a full scholarship. I majored in educational policy and social justice. I minored in psychology. I spent my summers interning at nonprofits, grant-writing organizations, youth advocacy groups, one remarkable program in the city that helped kids who'd aged out of foster care navigate their first year of college. I learned how money moved through systems. I learned how systems failed. I learned to read the gap between where help was promised and where it actually arrived. I graduated summa cum laude on a Saturday morning in May. Dr. Walsh sat in the second row. She wore a green dress. She cried again, more this time, and didn't try to hide it. At 25, I wrote the first grant proposal for the Second Chances Scholarship Program. Dr. Walsh helped me refine the language, cut what was self-indulgent, and strengthen what was already strong. We submitted to 3 foundations. 2 said no. The third said yes. The first cohort was 7 students. I knew each of their cases by name, by circumstance, by the specific moment when their families had failed them. I called each recipient personally when the award was confirmed. Janelle was the first one I called. She cried before I finished the first sentence. The morning after the call, I found the card under my office door. You gave me a room. I'll give you everything else. I put it on the corner of my desk. It's still there. By the time I was 27, we had funded 47 students across 5 universities, awarded just over $200,000, and received enough media coverage that my phone started ringing with calls from people I'd never met who wanted to know how we'd done it. I told them the truth. I told them it started with one bad night and one person who stopped. The Walsh house, I had started calling it that. Not Dr. Walsh's house, but the Walsh house. The way you name a place you belong to had evolved in the years since I'd moved in. I was gone most of the time, living in campus housing and then in my own apartment. But I came back regularly. I had a key. There was always a room for me, and Ptolemy the cat had eventually decided he tolerated my presence, which Dr. Walsh said was the highest honor he bestowed. We had dinner together every week, Tuesdays usually. She cooked. I brought wine or dessert depending on what she'd asked for. The ritual started when I was 16 and living in the guest room, and it had simply never stopped. Even during my graduate program, when Tuesdays were my longest teaching assistant day and I arrived at her door at 8 in the evening still carrying papers to grade, she had dinner waiting. At the university, I built a team. There was David, my program coordinator, who had a gift for logistics and a habit of sending emails at 4 in the morning with subject lines like critical but also not urgent. There was Priya, our grant writer, who could make a funding argument so precise and inevitable that reading it felt less like persuasion and more like mathematics. And there were the students, the ones who came through the program and then, sometimes, came back. Janelle finished her bachelor's degree in 3.5 years. She applied to law school. She came to my office to tell me in person, standing in the doorway with her acceptance letter in her hand, holding it the way I had once held a blue ribbon close, careful, not quite believing it was real. I thought about a lot of things at that moment. I didn't say any of them. I just said, "You did this." She shook her head. "We did this." I let her have that. It was true enough. I didn't look for information about my family. I want to be clear about that. I didn't search for them online, or drive past the old house, or ask mutual acquaintances for updates. I made a choice when I left that hospital room that the distance between us was not a punishment I was administering. It was a condition I was maintaining. For my own health, for my own forward movement. Information arrived anyway, the way it does when you live in the same general region of the world as people who know you. My cousin Marcus on my father's side, younger than me, someone I'd been close to before the accident, sent me a message 2 Thanksgivings after I'd started at Millbrook. He didn't know the full story, just that there'd been a falling out. He sent a photo from the holiday dinner. The table looked different, smaller than I remembered, or maybe the room had always been that size and I'd stopped noticing. There was a chair at the far end that had been pulled away from the table and not moved back. I recognized it as the chair that used to be mine. I didn't respond to Marcus's message. I didn't know what to say. The second time information arrived, it came through a mutual friend from high school, someone who hadn't known me well then and knew me less now, but had connected me on LinkedIn and occasionally liked my posts about the scholarship program. She sent me a message in the spring of my second year at Millbrook. "Ran into your sister at the mall. She said you were doing something impressive?" Didn't explain. She seemed kind of off. I thought about that word. Off. I filed it away. The third time was more specific. A former classmate, someone who'd been in the periphery of my friend group before the accident, sent me a message after the scholarship program got its first local news coverage. "I just saw the piece about your program," she wrote. I'm so glad you're doing well. I heard about what happened. I heard about a lot of things, actually, over the years. I asked her what she meant. She paused a long time before responding. Then, Kayla told people different things about why you weren't around. The story changed a few times. One version was that you'd had some kind of breakdown. Another was that you'd moved away and lost contact. By the time we were seniors, she was saying you died. A car accident, she said. When we were 12, I read that message 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the desk and looked out my east-facing window for a while. The water tower on the edge of town was visible. The sky was the specific gray of a morning, before it decides whether to rain or clear. She had told people I was dead. Not gone, not estranged, dead. I thought about what that meant, about what kind of architecture a person builds when they decide to erase someone that completely. I thought about the energy required, the maintenance of it. 13 years of managing a version of reality in which I simply hadn't survived. I tried to feel something decisive about it, anger or vindication, or the specific satisfaction of having been right about who she was. What I actually felt was something closer to tiredness. My phone buzzed. David, subject line. Funding confirmation not critical, can wait until tomorrow. I turned my phone back over. I opened the email. Tomorrow was already full. The scholarship program's first national press coverage came 18 months after the ceremony. A journalist from an education journal called my office. She wanted to write a profile. I said I would speak about the program but not about my family. She agreed. The piece ran in November. Headline: The scholarship that started with one bad night. She hadn't used those words I had, in passing, at the end of our second interview. She'd put them in the headline anyway. The morning it was published, my inbox had 47 new messages before I'd finished my coffee. 3 were from scholarship applicants. 2 were from universities requesting partnership discussions. 1 was from a foundation I'd been trying to reach for 8 months. 6 were from reporters who wanted follow-up interviews. The rest were from strangers. People who'd read the profile and recognized something in it. A woman in her 50s who'd been estranged from her parents for 30 years and had never told anyone why. A college sophomore who'd been sleeping in his car for 6 weeks and hadn't known programs like ours existed. A father who'd written to say he was reading the article and thinking about his daughter, who had cut contact 2 years earlier, and he was starting to understand why. I read every message. I answered every one. We met the following Thursday at a place near the university. He looked older. So did I, presumably. We talked for 3 hours. He filled me in on the family carefully, gauging my reactions, clearly unsure how much I wanted to know. Your dad doesn't say much, he said, near the end. But he went to one of your talks, last spring. The one at the education conference downtown. I looked up. He didn't talk to you. He sat in the back. Watched the whole thing. Marcus wrapped both hands around his mug. He told my dad afterward that you looked like yourself. He said it was something specific. She looked like herself. I didn't say anything for a moment. Outside the window, a woman was walking a dog that had stopped to look at something on the sidewalk. The dog pulled left. The woman waited. Then they both moved on. Okay, I said. That was all I said about it. 3 months before the commencement ceremony, I received a letter. Paper envelope, handwritten. My Millbrook University work address. The return address was a zip code I recognized without needing to look it up. It was from my mother. Not an email, not a text. A letter, handwritten on lined paper, 6 pages. The handwriting I recognized from grocery lists and birthday cards from before everything. I set it on my kitchen table. I made coffee. I sat down. I read it. She wrote about the years after the hospital. About a night approximately 8 months after I'd left when she found Kayla's diary. Not the one I'd glimpsed years earlier. A later one. She wrote in measured, careful language that was clearly the result of many revisions. I found entries that described things in ways that contradicted what I had believed. I found entries that described planning. She wrote about the conversation she and my father had after. About the months of what she called trying to understand what we had done. About therapy individual, then couples, then the complete uncomfortable silence on the other side when they finally asked Kayla directly what had happened that night. She wrote about Kayla's answer. She didn't reproduce it in the letter. She just wrote, she told us the truth, all of it, including the thing with the screenshots and the bruise, including the years before. We should have seen it. We should have looked harder. That is something I will have to carry. The last page was short. She wrote, I don't expect anything from you. I don't think I've earned the right to expect anything. I only wanted you to know that I know. And that the not knowing was not, in the end, because we were never told. We were told, you told us. We didn't listen. I folded the letter back along its original creases. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in the drawer of my bedside table, which is where I put things that matter, but that I am not ready to do anything with yet. I called Dr. Walsh. I need to come for dinner, I said. Can it be tonight instead of Tuesday? A pause. Ptolemy is in a mood. I don't care. Come at 6, she said. I'll make the pasta. I sat in her kitchen that evening with my hands around a coffee cup I wasn't drinking from, and I tried to explain what the letter had made me feel. I couldn't quite do it. The feeling was too composite, too many things at once, none of them the simple ones you'd expect. She knew, I said finally. At some point, she knew. And she still didn't reach me. For years, Dr. Walsh didn't say anything. She refilled my cup. And I'm still the keynote speaker, I said. Yes, she said. I accepted before the letter. I know. I looked at the letter again, which I'd brought with me without planning to. It changes things, I said. I don't know if it changes what I'm going to say, but it changes something. The morning of the ceremony, I dressed in a navy suit and borrowed Doc Walsh's grandmother's pearl necklace, which she'd offered without me asking, and which I'd taken without ceremony because by now that's how we operated. I arrived at Hargrove State University at 9:15. The campus was brick and old oak trees, and students in caps and gowns taking photographs with their families on the lawn. The air smelled like cut grass and someone's perfume and the specific kind of optimism that exists only on graduation days, when everything still feels like a beginning. President Cahill met me in his office. He was warm, generous, the kind of administrator who had made a career of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. He shook my hand with both of his. Miss Walsh, what you've built with the Second Chances program, it's exactly what this institution aspires toward. Thank you, I said. I'm glad to be here. David brought me to the backstage area. Faculty in robes, staff with clipboards, graduates peering through the gap in the curtains like children at a theater. I stood in the wings and looked at the program in my hand. Row 3, Kayla Sterling, Bachelor of Arts in Communications. My chest tightened. I let it tighten. I breathed through it. Dr. Walsh arrived and found me in the wings. Emerald dress, reading glasses on a chain. She hugged me without words. Head high, she said. Truth clear. I nodded. No revenge, she said. Just honesty. I know. She went to find her seat. Front row, stage right. President Cahill touched my shoulder. 2 minutes. I smoothed my jacket, checked my notes not because I needed them, but because holding paper gave my hands something to do. The auditorium held 800 people. I couldn't see individual faces from the wings, but I could feel the hum of it, the murmur of families settling in, the shuffle of programs, the particular frequency of a large crowd that doesn't yet know what it's about to hear. President Cahill introduced me. He mentioned the scholarship program, the 83 students, $200,000. He said the word extraordinary twice. The applause was polite. Welcome. Entirely unaware, I stepped into the light. The stage was larger than it looked from the wings. The podium was centered, the microphone adjusted slightly too high. I walked across the stage floor, my heels on the hardwood. Steady, and I corrected the microphone without breaking my stride. I looked out at the crowd. Row 3, third from the left, Kayla in her cap and gown, honor cords around her neck, mid-applause, smiling at something the girl beside her had just said. Then she looked up. Her hands stopped mid-clap. The smile went still. Her face moved through confusion, and then recognition, and then something I had no name for, not quite fear, not quite grief, something that lives between those two things. I looked at row 8, my parents, still applauding, not yet looking closely, just audience members being polite. I reached the podium. Good morning. My voice carried clean and clear across 800 people. Thank you, President Cahill. It's an honor to be here. My father's head lifted. He leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes, trying to place the voice. My mother's hand went to her chest. I smiled professionally, warmly, the way I smile at conferences and grant presentations and all the rooms where I have learned to inhabit my own authority. Today I want to talk about resilience, I said. About what happens when you lose everything and find yourself anyway. The auditorium went quiet. Not silent quiet, the specific quality of collective attention, hundreds of people leaning in at the same moment without knowing they were doing it. Let me tell you about a 15-year-old girl. I kept my voice steady, conversational. The way you tell a true story. She was told she didn't belong, that something was fundamentally wrong with her, that she was too broken to keep. One night in the middle of a storm she was put out, told to leave, told she wasn't wanted. Whispers. Uncomfortable shifting. My mother's hand was gripping my father's arm. I could see it from the stage. She wandered in that storm for hours. No phone, no money, nowhere to go. She was hit by a car. She nearly died. Kayla had gone completely still. Her face was white. The girl beside her had stopped smiling and was looking between Kayla and the stage with an expression of careful confusion. But someone stopped. Someone helped. Someone saw potential where everyone else saw problems. I gestured toward Dr. Walsh in the front row. She was already crying, not dramatically, just steadily, the way people cry when something has been coming for a long time. That person became her family, her mentor, her mother in every way that mattered. A pause. Let it settle. That 15-year-old girl was me. The auditorium went silent. 800 people. The kind of silence that has weight. My father was half standing. My mother pulled him back down. Both of them staring, mouths open, the specific expression of people who are realizing something in public that they had managed to avoid realizing in private for 13 years. Kayla looked like she wanted to become the seat she was sitting in. I continued. I'm here today because Dr. Nora Walsh didn't give up on me when my own family did. She taught me that rejection isn't the end, it's the beginning. The ceremony ended. Caps flew. Families surged forward. I slipped out the side door and found Dr. Walsh in the reception area. She hugged me before I could say anything. You did it. I did it. David appeared, flustered in the way he only got when something had happened that his clipboard hadn't accounted for. Cara, your parents are asking to speak with you. They're at the side entrance. I can tell them. 5 minutes, I said. Then I have a car. I walked to the side entrance. They were standing by a pillar. My father older, gray at the temples. The posture he used to have replaced by something lower, more uncertain. My mother careful makeup. A dress I didn't recognize. Her hands folded in front of her in the way she used to fold them in church. Kayla stood slightly behind them, red-eyed, not performing. I stopped 3 feet away. Professional distance. The distance I use in difficult meetings. You wanted to talk. My father's mouth opened. Closed. Cara. He swallowed. We didn't know you'd be here. No, I said. You wouldn't have. You look. My mother's voice caught. You look well. I am well. Dr. Walsh made sure of that. She flinched slightly at the name. My father looked at the floor. We owe you an apology, he said. You owe me considerably more than that, but an apology is a start. We made a terrible mistake. My mother's voice was steady, but only just. We should have listened to you. We should have protected you. Yes, no anger, just a fact. You should have. That's what parents do. They protect their children. Silence. Can we? My mother reached toward me. Can we talk somewhere? Privately, as a family. We're not a family. I said it gently, as if it were simply true, which it was. You made that clear 13 years ago. What we are is people who share a history I have spent a long time building a life on the other side of. We want to fix it, my father said. His voice cracked. I have regretted that night every single day. Every day. Good, I said. The word hung there, not cruel, just honest. Hold on to that. It matters. Please. He was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him before. Not the authority, not the disappointment, not the flat cold certainty he'd had when he pointed at the door. Something much smaller. Please. Kayla stepped forward. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I've wanted to tell you something for a long time, she said. I can tell you right now, if you want to hear it. Or I can put it in a letter. Or I can never say it, and you never have to hear it. But I need you to know I know what I did. And I know I had 13 years to correct it. She paused. I'm not asking for anything. I just need to say I'm sorry. I looked at her. This was the girl who had smiled at me through the window as I walked out into the storm. And also a 24-year-old woman standing at a graduation ceremony, publicly destroyed, Not running, staying. I heard you, I said. I accept that you were young when it started. The rest of the years are harder to explain. But I heard you. David reappeared. University letterhead folder. Scholarship applications for the next semester. My father looked at the folder. The university crest on the cover. My name, my title. You did all this. Yes. Despite he couldn't finish. Not despite, I said. Because of. What happened to me is the reason the program exists. Every student we fund is carrying something I used to carry. I took the folder from David. That's not a debt I owed you. It's the thing that grew from the damage. President Cahill appeared, beaming, unaware, shook my hand, told my parents how fortunate they must be, how remarkable their daughter was. My father said, yes, very proud. His voice barely held. President Cahill left. The 5 minutes were up. I need to go, I said. Can we? My mother started. I'll think about it. That was all I could offer, and it was more than I'd expected to offer. I'll think about it. Don't call. I'll reach out when I'm ready. If I'm ready. My father nodded. His hands were trembling. He clasped them together, the gesture I'd seen 1,000 times in his study. I turned and walked back to where Dr. Walsh was waiting. She didn't ask what had happened. She linked her arm through mine, and we walked out of the building into the afternoon light, which had gone warm and gold the way it sometimes does in May, entirely without irony. A week after the ceremony, I was cleaning out my desk. I found the envelope, cream-colored, my own handwriting. Soft now, permanently wrinkled from the rain, the address on the front faded to illegibility. I'd carried it in my jacket pocket that night, through the storm, through the accident, and when they discharged me from the hospital, it had been in the bag with my other belongings. Dr. Walsh had put everything in a box. The box had moved with me, dorm room, apartment, my office at Millbrook. I had never opened it. I opened it now. The letter inside was ruined. The words had dissolved. There was only the ghost of sentences shapes where ink had been, the impression of something carefully written. I knew what it had said. I had written it. It was an application for a summer research program, the kind you fill out with a personal essay and a statement of purpose and a description of what you hope to build. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I took a new sheet of paper, good paper, the kind with a little weight to it, and I wrote out the Second Chances Scholarship Program mission statement by hand. The words I had revised and refined over 5 years, the words that now appeared on our website and our grant proposals and the welcome letters we sent to every new recipient. I wrote them out completely, slowly, in my own handwriting. I folded the new paper and put it inside the old envelope. I sealed it. On the front, where the address had been, I wrote 3 words, what we built. I put it back in the box. The box goes wherever I go. It is not a scar. It is not a wound. It is the original document, the one I was carrying when someone stopped their car in the rain and decided I was worth saving. The one that got ruined in the storm and then, slowly, over 13 years, got rewritten. I didn't forgive my family because they deserved it. I held the door open barely, conditionally, with both hands because keeping it completely shut was starting to cost me something I couldn't afford to spend. My mother sent a card 2 weeks after the ceremony. Short. She said she was proud. She said she understood if I needed more time. She said Kayla was seeing a therapist. She said my father had cried in the car on the way home from the ceremony and hadn't stopped for an hour. I read it once. Put it in the drawer with the first letter. Dr. Walsh turned 60 the following November. We threw a party in her backyard. Colleagues, former students, people from the scholarship program, David and Priya and Janelle, and 18 other people who had come into my life through the specific gravity of building something. I gave a toast. I said, to the woman who taught me that family is built, not born. Thank you for choosing me, she cried. The good kind. 83 students, 8 universities, $216,000 awarded. Janelle is in her 2nd year of law school. The program is in expansion discussions with 3 more institutions. My east-facing office window has morning light all year. My parents' names are still on my phone. I haven't called. I haven't deleted them either. Every year on the 15th of October, I drive past the house I grew up in. I park across the street. I look at the windows, the door, the oak tree in the front yard that the storm bent and didn't break. I think, she survived it. She survived being called sick, being told she was too broken to love, being sent out into a storm as if she were something to be managed rather than someone to be kept. She didn't just survive. She built something from it. Something that outlasts the damage. Something with 83 names on it, and growing. I carry a ruined envelope in a box that moves with me everywhere I go. Inside it, the words that replace what the rain took. That envelope is the only thing my old family ever gave me. It was enough. People ask me what I would say to the 15-year-old girl who walked out into the storm. They ask this at conferences, in interviews, in the messages that come through the scholarship program's contact form from strangers who recognize something of themselves in the summary of what happened. I used to answer with something careful and considered, something about resilience, or about choosing your own family, or about the specific dignity of surviving what was meant to end you. Now I say something different. I wouldn't say anything to her. I would give her Dr. Walsh's card, the one Dr. Walsh handed me in the classroom 2 weeks before the storm, the one that said, "Don't let anyone dim that light." I would make sure she put it in a pocket that wasn't going to get wet. And then I would let her walk. Because everything that came after required going through that night. The hospital room, the decision, the guest room with the white walls. The applications were typed on a borrowed computer. The first scholarship. The 83 students. The ruined envelope in the box that goes everywhere. You can't get to where I am without passing through where I was. That's the part I can't fix for anyone. You have to go through it. I can make the other side more visible. I can build the infrastructure. I can put my name on a door that's easier to walk through than the ones I had to find. The rest is yours. If you were ever the one who kept the door open after everything, type "still standing" in the comments. Or tell me. When someone who hurt you finally asks for forgiveness, what do you actually feel? Drop it below. And if this story reached something you've been carrying, subscribe. There are more stories where this one came from. The most painful part of this story wasn't the storm. It was how easy it became for everyone to believe Cara was the problem. Because by the time she walked out that front door, the family had already been losing her for years. Not through screaming, not through violence, through smaller things. A ribbon nobody asked about twice. An achievement interrupted halfway through. A child learning to celebrate quietly because there was never enough emotional space for both daughters at once. That's the kind of damage people rarely talk about. The child who adapts the fastest usually becomes invisible first. And that's why so many people connected to this story. Not because of the graduation speech, not even because of the betrayal, but because they recognized what it feels like to slowly disappear inside a family while everyone keeps calling it normal. Because real emotional abandonment rarely looks dramatic while it's happening. Sometimes it looks responsible, practical, reasonable. A parent trying to keep the peace. A family believing the louder child, an easier narrative, a silence that keeps repeating until eventually it becomes reality. And maybe that's what made the mother's letter hurt more than the storm itself. Not the confession. The sentence underneath it, "You told us. We didn't listen." Because a lot of people know exactly what that feels like. To explain yourself clearly, and still watch someone choose a version of you that hurts less to believe. People want villains in stories like this. But the truth is harder than that. Frank and Donna weren't monsters every second of every day. That's what makes it painful. There were good moments, braided hair before a spelling bee, dinner tables, family photos, ordinary Tuesdays, and somehow, the damage still happened anyway. Because love without protection eventually stops feeling like love. That's the part audiences keep arguing about after stories like this. Whether regret changes anything, whether parents deserve another chance after failing the child who trusted them first, whether silence becomes its own form of betrayal once the truth is already sitting in front of you. And maybe the hardest part is Kayla. Because she started as a child wanting attention. But somewhere along the way, the lie became part of the architecture of the family itself, and nobody tore it down until Cara was already gone. That's why people respected Cara. Not because she became successful, but because she stood on that stage with every reason to humiliate them publicly, and still chose honesty over cruelty. That kind of restraint changes the way people listen to a story. Because deep down, most viewers weren't watching for revenge. They were watching to see whether someone who had been emotionally erased could still become fully seen. And she did. Not through anger. Through the life she built afterward. The students, the program, the scholarship letters, the ruined envelope she carried through the storm and kept anyway. That envelope mattered because it stopped being evidence of what destroyed her. It became evidence of what survived. So here's the question people keep fighting over after this story ends. If someone realizes your value only after losing access to you, is that love? Or is that grief? And if you were Cara, would you ever fully trust people who only learned how to see you after watching the rest of the world do it first? If this story stayed with you after the video ended, maybe it touched something quieter than anger. Maybe it reminded you of what it feels like to become the easy child too early. The one who survived so well, nobody noticed survival was costing them anything. And if that's true, then maybe this story wasn't just about Cara at all. Maybe it was about everyone who learned how to disappear quietly, before finally learning they deserved to be seen.